Hey everyone, welcome. We're going to give just a minute or two for everyone to come into the room. Just wanted to say hi. And we are going to start on time. Just giving a minute or two for everyone to come in the room, but welcome. Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started on time at 1 o'clock. Just giving everyone a minute to get in the room and get settled. For those of you just joining us, hey Jane, welcome. Thanks for jumping on. For those of you who are just jumping on, if you'd like to join our Slido, that is what we use for our Q&A. Please do so. We're going to get started at the very top of the hour. Welcome. I see a few more people jumping in the room. Welcome, welcome. So excited you're here with us today. We are going to get started in about 10 seconds. For those of you who are just jumping on, please take a look at our QR code. We're going to be utilizing Slido today to take in our Q&A as well as a few polls. Welcome. Okay, 1 o'clock officially, Central Standard Time. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here today. I'll be checking in throughout with the Slido code, so just keep an eye out for the Slido code for all of those that are just joining us. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Sexton Stanislavski, and I'm the founder of the RD Pro Coach. And as someone who has spent more than 20 years in nonprofit fundraising, including time directing teams that raised over 330 million a year, before we dive in, I think it's really important for us to just sort of take stock of where we're at. So would love to know where you all are from today. If you wouldn't mind popping in the chat your name and what organization you're with, that would be fantastic. And today we're digging into foundation grants and specifically why 2026 might be the most significant foundation funding opportunity many of us will see in the next decade. And there's not a lot of hype. This is real data. There are real frameworks and real strategies you can actually use this week. So for those of you just joining us, please again take a look at our Slido QR code there. I'm going to leave it on for another 10 seconds or so, and then pop your name and your organization in the chat for me. Amazing. Hey, Aubrey. Hey, Jennifer Muskegon. I love it. Orville area. I see my Boys and Girls Clubs peeps popping through the chat here. Hey, Jane, Susie, Melina. Hey, Melina. Hey, Tennille, Emily. Hi, Madeline. So glad you're all with us today. Deb, more Boys and Girls Clubs. I love it. Christina, Deb, so excited to see you on here. Thanks for joining us. Love it. Awesome. Awesome. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Dan. Thank you for joining. Again, scan that QR code and we are going to get started. So for those of you who don't know me, again, my name is Amy Sexton Stanislavski, and I have dedicated my entire career to supporting nonprofit organizations. I've raised over $750 million and I've worked to close 8-figure gifts and am currently working on a 9-figure. So cross your fingers by the time you come to my next webinar, maybe I'll have some good news for everyone. I'm really thrilled you're all with me. Wow, I'm thrilled that you're all here with me today. And I'd really, really love to jump right in to our material. Again, if you are just joining on, if you could please drop your name and organization in the chat. Would love to know who is with us today, just to get to know you a little bit better and say hello. But for now, let's jump in. So I really want to start where you are right now. What best describes your current focus on foundation funding? There's a live poll right now in Slido. Again, you can use this QR code. This will be on all of our polls. But tell me where you're at right now. What's the best scenario that describes your foundation funding? Okay. Split pretty well. Not split evenly. Having a foundation portfolio needing work. Okay. Going to give about 10 more seconds. Really want to know just where everyone is at as we're starting this session. This session was built around these four different categories. So wherever you are in the process, I've got something for you today. And this really tracks with what I am hearing across the sector. Heavily reliant on government grants, have a foundation portfolio that needs work. Love to see those on here actively cultivating foundation relationships. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. So let's dig in and start talking about what's actually happening out there and why foundation. All my deepest apologies. Some technical difficulties over here. I apologize. I'm going to go through this slide again for those of you who might have lost me in this little truncated time. I'm also recording this session as well. So for any of you who have lost the previous slides, I'll also be sending out the slide deck as a thank you for attending today. Again, my apologies for our technical difficulties. So let's start with a really uncomfortable truth. We've talked about this, and I'm sure at length you've probably talked about this within your organizations. But by January 2026, DOGE had driven the termination of nearly 16,000 federal grants, totaling almost $49 billion. Not a glitch, that's a structural shift, and it's something we need to be prepared for. The Urban Institute reported in October 2025 that 1 in 3 nonprofit service providers experienced a government funding disruption in just the first 4 to 6 months of 2025. It's a big deal. 1 in 3, 33% saw a disruption in grant funding. It's a big number. Not only that, 21% lost a grant outright and 27% faced delays or freezes. So we're really looking at some unprecedented times when it comes to grant federal funding or federal funding for grants. Programs delivering job training, mental health services, emergency shelters, education access were suspended, and staff were laid off. Communities were left without services. And many of the organizations I'm currently working with were unfortunately placed in the really difficult position when losing their grant funding. They scrambled to get other sectors stabilized. And while some had to lay off staff, others pivoted into other fundraising focuses. And if your organization is feeling this, you are not alone. And if you're not feeling it yet, but rely on government funding streams, this is your early warning. So we need to get in front of this. So, what does this mean for the landscape? What comes next? Fortunately, here's where the story changes. Foundation grant making surpassed $100 billion. $100 billion for the third straight year. And Foundation Mark, one of the leading research firms tracking foundation assets, projects that foundation giving in 2026 will reach either to 118 to 122 billion dollars. That's a 5 to 7% increase over an already record year. I really think this is going to be a banner year for foundations, and we're going to see organizations step up to the plate to help our nonprofit friends. Private foundations saw a 4.2% increase in grant dollars overall in 2024. And mid-sized foundations, the ones who are most often accessible to organizations like yours, jumped 13.6%. That's a big number. More than 35 foundations have signed a pledge to increase their payout rates to 8% or more for 2 consecutive years to help our nonprofit friends through this tough time. That's money actively looking for a home. And here's the shift that matters most for your letter of intent strategy. 40% of all grants in 2024 were general operating support. Now, my grant writer friends on here will know that is unheard of. That's up from 37% in 2023. Funders are loosening restrictions because they understand that nonprofits need flexibility right now. So here's the bottom line. Federal funding is contracting. Foundation funding is growing. And for organizations that know how to position themselves, this is a real opportunity. So for those still sending generic LOIs with no relationship behind them, spring is going to be a really tough time and it's going to be really frustrating. So let's make sure you're first in the group and changing the tide for your organization. So before you start applying anywhere, you need to understand what we are actually talking to, because a foundation is not necessarily one thing. It's actually 4 main categories of foundations. The first is an independent or a private foundation, and these are created by families, individuals, sometimes corporations. Think Ford, Gates, Annie E. Casey. These gifts typically range from a family giving 50,000 a year to organizations giving billions a year. It represents the largest category of foundations. The second is community foundations, and these are place-based. So they serve a specific geography and often have rapid response funds, discretionary grants, and local connections that larger foundations don't. And if you're not actively cultivating your regional community foundation right now, this is where I would start this week specifically. The third are corporate foundations, and these are tied to company priorities. So this is where we see community investment, workforce development, sometimes education. And they're often underutilized because people assume they require a major corporate relationship. They don't always. So keep that in mind. And then finally, there are operating foundations. These are organizations like the Pew Charitable Trust and some of its work that run their own programs and rarely give external grants. So knowing the difference will help you save time so that you're not wasting resources and energy. A really strong rule of thumb: start with community foundations for rapid response and local access, and then layer in independent foundations for deep mission alignment. Then add corporate foundations where your programs touch workforce development or even economic development. So as this funding landscape shifts, your LOI language or your letter of intent language, that very first experience that a foundation has with you, has to shift with it. And here's what's getting funded in 2026. Human services and basic needs are surging. And as federal safety net programs freeze, foundations are actively stepping in. So if you are in hunger, housing, mental health, workforce development, you have a really compelling and urgent narrative that you need to share right now. Mental health and behavioral health remain a really persistent funding priority that has not cooled since the pandemic. So if your work touches this, lead with it. Education access is really especially hot right now, and that's because of TRIO programs, which essentially serve first-generation college students. That had $660 million in federal funding frozen. It took one of the largest hits in the freeze. Foundations are actively filling that gap and are looking for credible organizations with strong track records. And then general operating support. And I really cannot stress this enough. Funders are moving towards flexibility. If a foundation offers general operating support, apply for general operating support. Stop asking only for restricted program funding. You're leaving unrestricted money on the table. And for those in nonprofit development, we know that that's some of the hardest funding to raise. Now, a word about what's harder. Proposals with explicit DEI language are getting more scrutiny in some funder spaces due to the political environment. This does not mean abandon your values. Please, that's not what this means. It means be strategic about your language. Talk about who you serve. Talk about the communities you affect and lead with outcomes. But don't shy away from your core values. Stay strong to who you are. And here's a hot take. If your LOI is still using the same language it used in 2022, you're leaving money on the table. The funding environment has shifted. Your positioning must shift with it. So I've got a question for the group before our next slide. Do you know what rapid response funding your regional community foundation is offering right now? Pop it in the chat. Quick yes or no. Do you know what rapid response funding your regional community foundation is offering today? Excellent. Sarah. Yes. Melina. Yes. Danielle. Ah, Susie. Okay, so now we know Susie. That's the big piece for you next week. Get in front of those community foundations. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Cassandra, some. Okay, great. Great. So it sounds like a lot of you are staying in touch with your community foundations. That is fantastic. We're going to talk about why that is so important and critical. Something most organizations don't know, there is a whole category of foundation funding moving right now that you will never find if you're not looking for it. Rapid response and emergency grant pools are activated when the sector faces disruption. And that's the moment we're exactly in right now. Community foundations across the country have opened special grant cycles. Philanthropic networks like Change Philanthropy and other regional philanthropy serving organizations are pooling emergency funds for their nonprofit friends. And some of this money is available in days, not months. So we need to get in front of that. Here's the catch. They don't broadly broadcast these opportunities. You have to be watching. So how do you watch? What do you do? Well, first, check your regional community foundation's website. Set up time to check weekly right now. Sign up for their email list if they have one. And get in front of any community foundation representatives. Take time to build relationships. We're going to lean a little bit harder on that in the next couple of slides. Find your state's nonprofit association and follow their funding alerts, and then be ready. Rapid response applications are simplified, but they move really fast. The organizations that land these grants are the ones who have their ducks in a row before the opportunity appears. So what does being ready look like? What does that look like for a nonprofit? Well, first, having a one-page case, just briefing and describing your urgency at the organization is key. I also would recommend having a 13-week cash flow projection showing the gap that exists. And then I would also recommend having 2 or 3 outcome metrics from your recent work. Then some other pieces that you might already have on hand, things like your EIN, your 501c3 determination letter, and any most recently audited financials should be readily available. I would put these in a standing folder on your desktop so that you can be ready to apply ASAP. And if you can have those things ready, you can apply for rapid response funding within 24 hours of seeing it. You can be at the very front of the line. So for those of you, for my members, my RD Pro Club, or my RD Pro Coach members, very excited to have you on today. There is a new tool, the Foundation Prospect Research Checklist in the library that includes a rapid response readiness section. So members, don't forget, download that today. And if you're not a member, we do have founding member pricing open through April 30th. And for my members and non-members, this is just a brief look at what the tool looks like. It's got 5 main core areas that will allow you to score. It will work with you. It makes recommendations for you, and then you'll be able to print all of those materials as well. So before we get into the how, I really want to hear again from you. What's your biggest challenge right now in securing foundation grants? Want to make sure we catch everything today with the slides and the Q&A. What is your biggest foundation funding challenge right now? Is it writing compelling LOIs, getting response to outreach, building relationships, reporting, compliance, finding the right funders? Go ahead and pick your top challenge. We're going to touch on each of these today, but I want to ensure that we hone in on the ones that make the most sense for you all. Finding the right funders, really popular. And Melina, I saw in the chat, Tennille, United Way in our area has also started to offer this type of funding as well. Us too, Tennille. United Way is a great resource. Melina, we're going to jump in. We're going to get that invite-only funders question. Finding the right funders. Okay, really, really popular, finding the right funders. But second is getting response to your outreach. I understand that can be really frustrating. We are going to touch on all 5 of these areas, from building relationships to reporting and compliance. So rest assured, we will meet some of these needs, but do keep your Q&A on Slido open if you have any specific questions about this area in case we don't cover it. So you all know me, you know my style. I am not interested in theory. We give stats, we talk about that breakdown, but I want practical approaches and advice, and I want you to work on them within a 30-day period. So let's get into it. Let's get practical. This is the section I built for the people who said, I don't know where to start. So now we've got a system. This is a 5-step framework that you can run in under 2 hours. I use a version of this myself when I consult with clients before we ever write an LOI. We go through this entire system. So step 1, define your funding fingerprint. Before you search, get really clear on what makes your organization fundable. Your mission, your geography, who you serve, what type of programs you run, and what grant size you realistically need and can manage. This typically takes 20 minutes and it saves you hours of wasted research. So step 2, run your searches. Candid, which is formerly the Foundation Center, is the gold standard. You can filter by your issue area, geography, and grant size range. You can also look at recent grantees. Organizations like yours that have already gotten funded tell you more than the Foundation's mission statement ever will. And this is about 30 minutes of really focused searching. Step 3, dig into the 990. This is a really critical step that many organizations skip. For every serious prospect, pull their IRS Form 990 from ProPublica or Candid. It takes 20 minutes, and we're going to talk exactly about what to look for in the next 2 slides. Step 4, hit the Foundation's website. Check their current guidelines. Are they accepting proposals right now? What's the deadline? What's the format for their proposals? Who's the program officer? Who's the CEO? 20 minutes tops. Get into that website and figure out who you're talking to. And then step 5, score your prospect. This will save you so much time in the long run. Rate them on mission alignment and organizational access. 10 minutes tops. And I'm going to show you a scoring matrix in just a moment. And then think about your output, a tiered prospect list. So tier 1, really strong fit, and you have a path to contact. Tier 2, strong fit, but you might need to build a little bit of a relationship first. And then tier 3, the watch list. So you're going to go after tier 1 this quarter, and the other 2 tiers, we're going to talk about how to put those into cycles. Again, that Foundation prospect research checklist is in the RD Pro Coach library. This walks you through every single step of the framework. So my members, please, please, please do not sleep on this prospect checklist. Go over to the website and download it. It's one of our most used resources. Don't forget to grab it today. So let's talk tools, because the research question I get most often is, where do I start? How do I get rolling? Well, first, Candid, and that's candid.org is where I would start. They have a grant search tool, a 990 finder, and the Foundation directory online. And here's a pro tip. Many public libraries offer free access to the full Foundation directory. So before you pay for the subscription, check with your local library or your local library system. The second is ProPublica's Nonprofit Explorer. It's completely free and it lets you search 990s by organization name or EIN. So you'll want to bookmark this one on your webpage. Instrumental is a paid tool, but if you're a grant writer doing volume, it's really worth the ROI. The matching algorithm is genuinely a really strong tool. But here's the underused goldmine: foundation annual reports. Most foundations publish them. Go to their website and find their most recent annual report. Look at the grantee list. You may find those are your comps, organizations similar to yours that already got funded. If you see your peer organizations in there, you belong on that prospect list. And then don't sleep on LinkedIn. Find the program officer, look at their posts, check mutual connections. You would be so surprised at how often a board member of yours knows someone at a foundation. And that warm introduction is worth more than any cold letter of intent. Now, I'd love to hear from the group. Drop in the chat. I want to know what your favorite free grant research tool is. So drop it in the chat. And while you're answering, I do want to call out that the RD Pro Coaches Philanthropy Brief template does help you document your research on each prospect as you go. So you're not starting from scratch. So again, members, get on our website and download that philanthropy brief so that you can start using this. Oh, Tennille Zeffy. Okay, I'm not familiar with Zeffy. That's awesome. Google searches, Aubrey, Candid. Yeah, Melina, me too. Candid is my go-to. Anyone else? What is your favorite free grant research tool? Tennille, I'm going to put Zeffy in my notes. That's fantastic. Thanks, Tennille. Awesome. Well, while you all are thinking about what your favorite tool is, we are going to move on to how to read a 990. Again, all do not sleep on these 990s. They are your secret weapon. Most people look at them, feel overwhelmed, and then close the tab. But here's what you actually need to know. And I know this looks like a lot, but I promise you, once you know the 3 sections to review, it takes max 10 minutes per foundation. So first, you're going to go to part 15 or part XV, if you will, the grants list. This is what tells you who they funded and for how much and for what purpose. That's the most important page. And if you look at nothing else, look at that page. Is anyone doing work similar to yours? Do you have any peer organizations listed on there? Is there anyone in your geography or in a similar organizational budget? Take a look at that section first. Then look at part 1, total assets versus total grants paid. This tells you giving capacity. So a great example, a foundation with 10 million in assets and 800,000 in grants is right-sized for their giving. A foundation with 10 million in assets that gave 2 million last year is unusually generous, or they got a big donation. Both are really interesting and worth looking at and worth just understanding what the grant output looks like versus total assets. Then check with the officers and directors section. Who sits on their board? Run their names, look them up on LinkedIn. Are any of them connected to your organization or your donors or your board members? That is your access point. Again, a warm intro is always stronger than a cold LOI. This also gives you an opportunity to look for some red flags. And here's really what to watch out for. If the foundation only funds 1 or 2 organizations year after year, especially organizations they control, they're not really accepting outside applications. If their assets have been declining for 3 or more consecutive years, they might be tightening. If there's no geographic or mission overlap with your work anywhere in their grant history, move on. Move on. There are more funders out there for you to actively work with. I'm working with an organization right now who's actually learning to read 990s, and we've been able to really narrow down their grant research to more focused asks and have increased our hit rate by 20% in 6 months. That's the difference. We've not only saved a lot of time and effort by focusing on grants, we have an actual chance of winning, but we understand what the yield looks like. And we're not spending times on area, or we're not spending time on areas that don't show strong yield. So not only are we helping our staff being a little bit more well balanced, but we're going after opportunities that make a difference, that we have a higher hit rate with. So using tools like reading 990s will help develop that. So we've started reading we understand how to read our 90s. How do we build our prospect list? What does that look like? Well, here's how you prioritize once you have a list of prospects. We've talked about how to get the research done, starting to provide a tiered list. Now we prioritize, because you can't effectively cultivate 40 foundations at once. Or maybe you can. Maybe you can double down on the hours in the day. Score every single prospect on two major dimensions: mission alignment and organizational access. Mission alignment is 1 to 5. So how closely does their funding history match your work? Not just their stated mission, their actual grant funding history. This is where the 990 comes in. A foundation that says they fund education but has only funded private schools is one for a public charter network. Organizational access is also 1 to 5. So do you have a warm contact, a board connection, a prior relationship, or a credible path to introduction? Cold is a 1. Direct board to board connection is a 5. So look at both of those on a 1 to 5 scale. Now, here's the multiplier. If you have personal access, the odds of funding go up significantly. So multiply the access score by 2 before ranking. That's you personally. If you personally have access, multiply that score by 2. What you're looking for is to separate your portfolio into 3 tiers. And we talked about this in the last couple of slides, but we're looking to focus our research and activity on tier 1 prospects. Strong alignment with a true, real path to a relationship. I tell clients to work on a focused portfolio of 8 to 12 serious prospects in that first category, or category A for those of you who work major gifts or individual giving. That's it. Quality over volume. A targeted portfolio of 10 well-researched prospects always outperforms 50 cold applications every single time. Every single time. And I have seen it again and again and again. So focus on that tiered prospect list. Question for the chat. How many foundation prospects are you actively cultivating right now? On average, how many foundation prospects are you cultivating right now? 4, Melina. Okay, 2. Great. Awesome. 2, Susie. Terrific. Really strong. Now, again, this is based for a traditional grant writer or a traditional development person who focuses primarily on their role of grants. If you're splitting your role, like a traditional director of development, maybe a VP of philanthropy, this may look a little bit different for you. So you need to scale based on size and based on your job description. Always keep that in the back of your mind. But that's fantastic. Please add in a little bit more. Would love to know just in general how many you are working on. 4 plus, Christina. Fantastic. Okay. So we've done our research. We have a prospect list. Now what do we do? The biggest mistake I see organizations make is going straight from research to LOI submission with no relationship in between, and then wondering why they never heard back. Here's the approach that actually works. First, research before you reach out. And I mean deep research. Know their recent grantees, know what they funded and what they didn't fund. Know the program officer's name and the portfolio they oversee. When you reach out and say, I've reviewed your 2024 grantees and noticed your investment in organizations like X, that's not flattery, it's homework. And program officers notice the difference. Second, make the connection visible. Don't say, I think we'd be a great fit. Say your recent grant to specific organization in specific issue area suggests our work in specific issue area may align with your current priorities. Specific, evidence-based, not generic. We are done with generic LOIs. Third, ask for a conversation, not money. Your first outreach is not an ask, it's an introduction. We'd welcome the opportunity to share our work with you and learn more about your current priorities. 15 or 20 minutes, that's all. It doesn't take a lot of time, and program officers are usually pretty busy, so that's about all they can really afford to give you for an introductory conversation. Now, about 55% of private foundations do accept unsolicited proposals, according to Candidate's 2025 survey. And many foundations that say they don't accept unsolicited proposals will still take a meeting if you approach them thoughtfully. The word no in the guidelines often means don't send a cold full proposal, not a don't ever reach out. So your first contact email should be 3 sentences maximum. Name one grantee, state one specific alignment point, and ask for one specific thing, like a meeting. So we've talked a little bit about the LOI, and this is probably one of my favorite slides in the entire deck, because I think a strong LOI is just incredibly important. And for those of you who are joining, who are just getting started with grant writing, a LOI is noticed as a letter of intent or a letter of inquiry, because this is where good research goes to die. The number one mistake is leading with your organization instead of the funder's priority. You do not have to do a show of hands, but I'm sure many hands would be raised in the room if you have seen an LOI open with, founded in 1998. Our organization has been proudly serving the community for 27 years. I want you to mentally recall the last LOI you wrote or reviewed. Did it happen to start with that sentence? Nobody cares about your founding date. I'm so sorry. I love you all. And I say that with love. Program officers read hundreds of LOIs. If yours opens with your organizational history, you have likely already lost them. They've already pivoted to scanning. So stand out. Here's what they want to see. First, the problem. Then they want to see the gap. The community need that exists, whether or not your organization exists, and then lead with urgency. Position your work as the only solution. Then and only then introduce your organization as the credible, capable vehicle to deliver it. A strong LOI structure that works is a hook that opens with the community need, one sentence of alignment. So this is why the funder and why now. Your program description in plain language, so no wild, unorganic, if you will, or inorganic sentences. Be plain with your language. Your outcomes, your specific, measurable, time-bound outcomes, your organizational credibility, briefly, and then your specific ask. So some other common LOI mistakes to avoid are not including a specific dollar amount or objectives that are activities, not outcomes. Also addressing the letter to Dear Program Officer instead of finding a person's name. That is a research failure and generic language that doesn't connect to what the funder has actually funded before. A letter of inquiry is your audition. You don't need to write the whole play. You do need them to get to want to call you back. So it's the audition. We use that as the first response, the first round, if you will. Here's a sample comparison for some letter of inquiry consideration. We've talked about mentally recalling the last LOI you wrote. Did it open with founded in 1998, ... Nobody cares about your founding date. Again, I say that with love. Think about the program officer. So also think about the opening. The program officer is looking for a warm intro. This tells the funder that you didn't even look up their name when you say Dear Program Officer. That's a research failure before you have written a single word. And then the ask. There isn't one on the left. The program officer has to guess how much you want. Now, on the right is a much stronger version. Same organization, same foundation, completely different outcome. The opening line here, the community is the hero, not the org. The funder is being invited to solve a problem, not fund an institution. So notice what's in paragraph 2, a real grantee from their portfolio by name, and then one sentence that tells the program officer she did her homework. There's a specific dollar ask in there. 50,000. Don't make funders guess. Don't forget, this is your audition. You don't have to write the whole play. You just need them to pick up the phone when you reach out. Foundations are run by people. And this is the one part that probably feels obvious until you realize how many organizations forget it the moment they get a grant. So before the proposal, follow the foundation on LinkedIn. Comment thoughtfully on what they share, not great post comments, but real engagement. Show that you're paying attention. Attend their public events when they happen. If a program officer speaks at a conference, go to their session. Invite them to one of your events. It could be a site visit, an annual report release, or maybe even a program celebration. During the grant cycle, return every single email promptly. We should do this regardless, but especially during the grant cycle. Submit every single required document on time and in the format they asked for, not in the format you would like to submit, the format they asked for. If they do not provide you with a template, ask them what kind of format they prefer. If a deadline is Thursday, do not submit Friday. You must meet their deadlines. This is critically important to maintaining strong grant relationships. The application process is a preview of what it's like to work with you. So keep that in mind as you're going through this process. They're judging the application process just as deeply as they are determining what amount to give. Now, after you get a yes, please, 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 please do not disappear until your report is due. Lots of organizations do this, and I understand we get busy, right? We are doing all of the things all of the time, but send a brief thank you. Make a phone call to the program officer, not an email, a phone call. Report on the outcomes, not just the activities, and tell them what's changing because of their investment. Now, if we get a no, and this is where so many organizations leave money on the table, if you get a no, send a thank you note anyway and ask if they'd be willing to share feedback. Ask when, not if, you can reapply and stay in touch. Some of my longest term foundation relationships started with a no that was handled gracefully. The long game in foundation fundraising looks exactly like this. It looks exactly like major gifts. It's consistent, genuine relationship building over time. People give to people, even when the people work for institutions. So keep that in mind. It's just like major gifts. So if you work in major gifts or you work in annual gift development, treat your foundation officers the same way. If anyone has a great story to share about how they built a strong relationship, please drop it in the chat. I would be so interested. And I know sometimes these webinars are hard to engage and unmute, but please drop it in the chat if you have a great story. I do have one I'd love to share is, I worked with an organization recently who were seeking funds from a mid-sized family foundation to support some ecological and environmental research support programs. The director of development actually made a really concentrated effort to connect with the foundation representative, even going as so far to attend some events that they knew they were attending to network. This was way before submitting a letter of inquiry, which can sometimes happen. They invited them out to a tour to the research facility and ended up with an initial grant of $25,000. Now, the director of development stayed really consistent with the relationship. They cultivated them, they stewarded them, invited them to events, they provided them with newsletters, they did check-in calls, just to report out on what that $25,000 looked like from an outcome perspective. They presented a really beautiful impact report once the grant work was completed and ended up with an additional $500,000 grant a year later towards their comprehensive campaign. That development director knew the capacity was there, but she had to build the relationship, and it really paid off in dividends from a $25,000 gift to a $500,000 unrestricted grant a year later. That's big time ROI just from building strong relationships. So as we start to close, I want to leave you with some brief synthesis of what the research says funders are actually rewarding right now, just so you can start auditing your own materials against this list. The first is demonstrated community trust and local credibility. Funders are moving away from scale as the primary signal of quality. A community organization with deep local roots and clear community voice is increasingly competitive. A clear theory of change with measurable short-term outcomes, not just a logic model that lives in a random strategic plan. Outcomes you can actually report on within the grant period. Organizational resilience is another big one. How has your organization responded to the funding environment shift? Funders want to know you're managing responsibly, not just surviving. They want to know you're thriving and you're adapting. So talk about your revenue mix. If you have a reserve fund, talk about that. Talk about your diversification strategy. It's okay if you are not at the end game of these strategies. It's okay to share that with funders. The bigger point that funders want to see is that you have a plan. And this leads to the next one, financial transparency. They want to see your current year budget and your revenue mix, and if possible, your audited financials. So don't hide the fact that you lost federal funding. Frame it as the context that makes this partnership timely. And then collaboration and ecosystem thinking. Are you working with other organizations? Or do you know who else is doing similar work in your community? Funders are paying attention to whether grantees play well with others. So you are deeply encouraged to take a look at your own community partners as you're reaching out to foundations. All right, let's land this plane. You heard me say earlier, I'm not about the theory, I want action. So I don't want you to leave today with a lot of great ideas that turn into nothing because you don't have a next step. So here is your assignment. Tomorrow, pull your current prospect list if you have one. Score every single prospect on that 5x5 scale of alignment and access using the framework we covered today. You're going to get this presentation in your email, so use it. If you don't have a list, day one is starting one. Identify 5 to 10 foundations that have funded similar work in your geography in the last 2 years. So day two, you're going to start pulling the 990s for your top 3 prospects. Spend 20 minutes on each, find the program officer name, and write it down for each foundation. Day 3, draft one first contact email using the structure we talked about, those 3 sentences. Grantee reference, 1 alignment statement, and 1 ask. Then sit on it overnight and send it on day 4. That way you'll have some time to think on it. Another caveat or another plan for this week is to go to your regional community foundation's website if you have not already done so. Look for their open rapid response or open grant cycles and check to make sure you're on their email list and sign up if you are not, if they have one. So this month, here's a goal for this month. Find out if your state has a nonprofit association and if they have a funder briefing or a resource list. If they do, use it. And members, again, reminder, get on the library, download these tools. They're there for you to utilize. So use these tools. They're waiting for you to be downloaded. Speaking of the library, want to tell you what's there and available for you. You've heard me reference the Foundation Prospect Research Checklist and the Philanthropy Brief, but I also want to note the annual campaign plan template is very critical to this work as well. Part of strong foundation strategy is embedded in annual strategy. It's part of your diversified revenue strategy. It's not the only strategy. So think about that as you're building your annual plans. We also have fundraising activities dashboards. So if you're having trouble tracking your full grant pipeline, take a look at our dashboard. You're more than welcome to download and use it so that nothing falls through the cracks. And then the board attributes and competencies chart, because your board members are your best path to warm introductions to foundations. So make sure you use this. All of this lives at the RD Pro Coach library, so make sure you get in there. And members, again, don't forget to download all of these tools. So this brings me to something I'm really genuinely excited about. On April 22nd, we're going to have a grant writing boot camp. So 2 weeks from today, we are back for part 2 of this session for our grant writing boot camp. Free for members, $50 for non-members. So please join us for the part 2. We're going to dig into templates, tactics, and winning proposals. So today we covered the strategy layer, how to research funders, approach them, and position your organization. April 22nd is where we get into the actual writing. So we'll go through letter of inquiries and proposal templates, how to write outcome statements that actually mean something and measure. We'll look at budget narratives that build funder confidence, and then the most common reasons proposals get rejected, and how to fix them before you submit. So the link to register is in there, and you'll also get it in your follow-up email. So I want to make sure you leave ready. We've got a couple of minutes left. I'm going to open up our Q&A to our Slido. If you have the Slido open, you can quick scan here, but open for any questions that you might have. And if you don't have any questions, thank you all for joining. I'm so appreciative that you were here. Take a minute to see if we have any questions. Really common question I've gotten lately is how long a letter of inquiry should be. Follow the funder's guidelines always. They typically specify, but if they don't, 1 to 2 pages at a maximum. They usually will have an online portal and they might have character or word limits. So go make sure you stay within those guidelines. Remember, your LOIs are not proposals, they're invitations to conversations. Okay, I'll stay on a little bit longer in case anyone does have any questions. Feel free to pop them in the chat. But thank you all so much for joining. You are big. You have been a phenomenal group, and I'm just so grateful that you joined me today. Remember, the checklist is in the library, and on April 22nd, 2 weeks from now, is when our big grant writing workshop begins. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me or connect with me through the library. Thank you all so much. Go get those grants. Have a great week. Thanks for coming, Christina. Thanks, Tennille. Okay, looks like we don't have any questions. Have a great week. Good to see you.